Alright, so like I said, we're going to start with our easiest of factoring some trinomials today. The very first thing we're going to start with is just talking about what your first step is when you factor, no matter what you have that it tells you to factor. And that is to look for a GCF, okay? So what you're looking for is you're looking at all of your terms and you're going to try to find what it is, if anything, that they have in common that you can factor out first. So for example, if we start with number 1, I've got 2x to the 4th minus 4x to the 3rd plus 8x squared. So I want to look for what they have in common, if anything. So start with your numbers, 2, 4, and 8. What do they have in common? A 2. Okay, so we're going to go with it's the biggest thing we can get, but what they all are actually divisible by. So we can pull out a 2, and then I have x to the 4th, I have x to the 3rd, and I have an x squared. So what do they have in common? X squared. So I'm going to be able to pull out a 2x squared. And so the way that we do this is we take whatever our GCF is, we put it in the front, and then we put a parenthesis, and then basically we're dividing each term by that 2x squared and writing what we have left after we pull out that GCF. So if I take 2x to the 4th and I divide it by 2x squared, what's left? Just 1x squared, yeah. Okay. Okay, and then I'm going to bring down the minus sign because I didn't pull out a negative. I don't have to worry about changing my signs. And then I'm going to ask myself, what do I have left if I take 4x to the 3rd and I divide it by 2x squared? 2x, yep. And then we're going to do that last term. It's a positive 8x squared, so I'm going to bring down my plus sign. And if I divide 8x squared by 2x squared, what am I left with? 4. And then I'll close my parenthesis. So the very first thing we look for every time our directions tell us to factor is, do they have anything in common? If they do, I can pull it out. If they don't, then we'll have to talk about the different methods once we reach each point. And then from there, we will try to simplify or factor a little further. The 2x squared is going to stay on the outside, and what I'm looking at now is that trinomial inside of my parentheses. And we're starting with the easy trinomials today, and those are the ones that don't have anything in front of x squared other than 1, okay? And when that is the case, this is what I'm looking for. I am looking for numbers that multiply to give me 4 and add to give me 2. Okay, I don't care about the signs. I have a little trick that helps you determine your signs without worrying about it in the beginning. And again, that may not be the way that you were taught, so you can do what you're comfortable with. But I want to know, are there numbers that multiply to give me 4 and add to give me 2? So think about your factors of 4. 1 and 4 and 2 and 2. Do either of those add to give me 2? 1 plus 4, does that add to give me 2? No. Does 2 plus 2 add to give me 2? No. So what that means is that cannot be factored any further, and the only thing that we are able to do on that is to pull that GCF out. So we are going to leave our answer just like this. Okay, that is factoring if you're able to pull out a GCF. Even if you can't break it down any further, we can still pull out what they have in common. Does that make a little bit of sense? Okay. All right, let's talk about number 2. Same thing here. We have 10ab to the 3rd minus 15a squared b squared. So what we're looking for first is, what is it that they may have in common? And I always think about it individually, starting with your numbers. What is it that 10 and 15 can both pull out, or we have in common? They can both divide by 5. Okay, so we can pull out a 5. Our first term has a to the 1st. Our second term has an a squared. What do they have in common? Just 1a. Okay, so we're going to put that next to the 5. And then for my b's, I have a b to the 3rd and a b squared. What is it that those have in common? B squared. B squared. Okay, so what I'm able to pull out in its entirety is 5ab squared. And then again, what I'm going to do from there is I'm going to divide each term by that 5ab squared and write what we have left. So if I take 10ab to the 3rd and I divide it by 5ab squared, what do I have left? 2, what'd you say? 2ab? 2b? Okay, let's take a look at that. Think about it in terms of doing it like this. Okay. So 10 and 5 divided by 2. If I have exactly the same number of A's at the top and the bottom, if I'm pulling out exactly what I have, then don't those just cancel each other out? Okay. And then if I have 3 B's, but I take away 2, I only have 1 left. So that's where we get that B from. And then if I divide 5A squared by, if I divide 15A squared B squared by 5AB squared, what do I have left? 3A. How many terms are left in that parenthesis? 2, okay. Right now we haven't talked about any kind of factoring, so specifically with 2 terms, we are not going to be able to break that down any further. They both have different variables. They don't have anything else in common, so we are going to just leave our answer like that. Kind of refreshing a little bit, somewhat beginning. All right, now we're going to get started on our trinomials. You'll take a minute to write these down. Again, I'm going to talk you through how I think about it with the sign placement so that I don't have to worry about that. A lot of you are taught to figure out what numbers, positive and negative, go together to give you the middle term. But I have a little bit of a different method to think about it so that it kind of takes out some of the guesswork. So when I'm talking about terms and signs, I want to make sure we are clear. So for example, I'm just going to rewrite that first question. How many signs do we have in this? 2. Okay. So when I'm talking about the first sign, I'm referring to this one. And when I talk about the second one, I'm referring to that one. Okay. So if your second sign is a plus, you are looking for numbers that multiply to give you this, that add to give me that middle term. I don't care about the other signs yet, okay? All I'm looking for is what numbers multiply to give me 9 and add to give me 10. What 2 numbers multiply to give me 9 and add to give me 10?
1 and 9.
1 and 9. Okay, so what we're going to do, first of all, I skipped a step. Do they have a GCF, all 3 of those there? Anything I can pull out? No. Okay. So we have to keep in mind that that's what we're going to look for first. So when we factor, what we're doing is we're setting up 2 parentheses. We're breaking this thing down into 2 binomials that multiply to give me that answer. The first term, x squared, can be separated into 2 equal parts by putting x and x. And then you told me 1 and 9 are the 2 numbers that multiply to give me 9 and add to give me 10. Okay. This also tells me, this plus sign right here also tells me about my signs. It tells me if my signs are going to be the same or if they are going to be different. If it is a plus, that means my signs in my parentheses are going to be exactly the same. They will either both be a plus or both be a minus. And how we determine that is we look at the first sign. If the first sign is a plus, they will both be a plus. If the first sign is a minus, they will both be a minus. So in this case, both of my signs are going to be plus. So if the second sign is a plus, you are looking for looking for factors of the last term that add to get the middle term. Also, your signs will be the same. And they are both whatever the first sign is. Okay, so again, if your second sign is a plus, you're looking for factors of that constant term, that last term, that add to give you the middle term. Okay. And then that plus also tells me that my signs are going to be the same and they are going to be whatever the first sign is. And that way I don't really have to think about a positive 1 and a positive 9 or a positive 1 and a negative 9. I don't have to think about that. Okay, so that's why it to me makes it a little bit easier, cuts out some of the guesswork to be able to factor these. And then of course you would try to make sure that you are completely factored, but again, I have a binomial and a binomial. We haven't talked about factoring binomials yet. So at this point, these are not going to be able to continue to factor. So my answer is going to be left just like that. Yes, ma'am. Sure. Does that make a little bit of sense? Okay. All right, so number 4, we have x squared minus 12x plus 36. First question, do we have a GCF? Do all 3 of my terms have anything in common? No. All right. So again, we are looking for numbers that multiply to give me 36 and add to give me 12. Okay, so you've got to think about your factors. You've got to be good at your factors. If you're not sure, a calculator can help you. Just divide it out and make a list. Some of you like to make lists. Some of you do not. What I mean by that is, what are all of my factors of 36? I always start at the beginning. 1 in that number. And then 2 and 18, 3 and 12, 4 and 9, 5 doesn't go, and 6 goes in 6 times. Do you all know how to tell if you've gotten all the factors or not? Once you repeat a number, you have all the factors. Okay, so you keep listing your factors until you have a repeated number, and then you know you're done. So what I want to know is which pair of these add to give me 12? 6 and 6. So we're going to set up our 2 parentheses again. I'm splitting my x squared into 2 equal parts, if my pen will write. And then I'm going to put 6 and 6. Also, I need to tell you something in just a second. And again, I don't think about my signs until after I figure out my factors. My signs are going to be the same. They're either both a plus or both a minus. And they are going to be whatever my first sign is. And in this case, what is that first sign? A negative. So guess what both of my signs are going to be in my parentheses? Negative. Okay. This can be your answer also. Some of you prefer to do that. Doesn't that mean the same thing? Okay. So either one of those answers would be okay. I tend to just leave it as x minus 6 and x minus 6 twice. But if you want to put x minus 6 squared, that means exactly the same thing. Are we kind of okay? And when I say these are the easiest, is because I really only have that last number that I have to worry about, really, the factors of that. When we get to tomorrow, they'll get a little bit more difficult. So, write those down. So this one is slightly different because this time, what is my second sign? It's a minus. So what I'm looking for now are numbers that multiply to give me 15. But this time I don't want them to add. I want them to subtract to give me that middle number. Okay, we'll talk about how to place your signs in just a minute. I want numbers that multiply to give me 15 and subtract to give me 2. What numbers multiply to give me 15 and subtract to give me 2? 3 and 5. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set that up. It does not matter if I put the 3 in the first parenthesis or the 5 in the first parenthesis. The order of the parentheses doesn't matter. What does matter is that your signs are correct inside. Okay? Just a second, we'll talk about how to place our signs. I do. Okay. Okay, so with this one, when my second sign is a minus, trying to get it color coded. This tells me that my signs are not going to be the same this time. They're going to be different. And what I mean by different is 1 plus and 1 minus. Well, how do I know which one to put where? This first sign goes in front of the bigger number. What is bigger, 3 or 5? 5. So guess what I'm going to put in front of my 5? A plus, which means the minus has to go in front of the 3. Okay. So, if the second sign is a minus, you want factors of the last term that subtract to get the middle term. And then your signs will be different. And that means 1 of each. And then the first sign goes in front of the bigger number. So again, if the second sign is a minus, you're looking for factors of the last term that subtract to give you the middle term. And then I can place my signs once I figure that out. The first sign goes in front of the bigger number. You'll have 1 of each, 1 plus and 1 minus. So go ahead and try number 6 then. I want x squared minus 6x minus 27. And again, if you feel more comfortable thinking about it however you were taught, then do it that way. Okay, I'm just trying to tell you what I think is a little bit easier. Gotta make sure we don't have our phones out. I see a lot of you with your phones on your desk. They are not supposed to be on our desk. They're supposed to be put away. Don't want to have to send anybody out. X squared minus 6x minus 27. This tells me that so I'm looking this time for numbers that multiply to give me 27 and subtract to give me 6. Again, I do not have a GCF, so I cannot pull anything out. What numbers multiply to give me 27 and subtract to give me 6? 9 and 3. It doesn't matter if I put the 9 first or the 3 first. What matters is my placement of my signs once I decide those numbers. And again, this tells me that my signs are different. And that sign goes in front of the bigger number. What's bigger, 3 or 9? 9. So I get a minus in front of the 9, which means in front of the 3 I have to put a plus. No. Yes, it does. That part matters. The signs in front of those numbers matter. The order doesn't matter. So I could write that as x minus 9 and x plus 3. But the minus has to go with the 9 and the plus has to go with the 3. Okay. Everybody okay with that? All right, try both of those for me, please. I got 1 of each. Second sign tells me if I'm going to add or subtract. It also tells me if my signs are the same or different. Number 7, x squared plus 4x minus 21. I do not have a GCF to pull out. I am looking for numbers that multiply to give me 21 and subtract to give me 4. What numbers multiply to give me 21 and subtract to give me 4? And again, order of those doesn't matter. What does matter is how I place my signs. Because this is a minus, my signs are going to be different. That means 1 plus, 1 minus. The first sign goes in front of the bigger number. What's bigger, 7 or 3? So I'm going to put a plus 7 and a minus 3. How do we feel so far? Pretty good? Okay. All right, number 8, x squared minus 20x plus 36. Again, they do not have a GCF. I have nothing that I can pull out, so I want numbers that multiply to give me 36, and this time I want them to add to give me 20. We just made our list a minute ago, but I erased it. 2 and 18, yep. And then again, this is a plus, which means my signs are going to be the same this time, either both a plus or both a minus. And how do I know? I look at the first sign. That tells me what they are both going to be. So in this case, they're both going to be a minus. The thing about factoring is we can't learn it and then forget it. It pops back up, and it will pop back up for the rest of the year in a lot of the things that we do. So it's important that we get it down pat now as we're learning it, so that when we have to apply it to other things that we can, it's like secondhand to be able to factor. Okay, so we need to make sure we're trying to get really good at this point before we include other things. Hold on. Okay. All right, let's take a look at 9. Write that one down. This one we're going to have to talk about for a minute. So a lot of the first few that we have done did not have a GCF, but when we factor, that is always going to be your very first step, is to look at your terms and decide, do they have something in common that I can factor out, okay? Here I have a 2x squared, a 20x, and a 48. What are they all divisible by? What do they have in common? 2. A 2. So that's what we want to do first, is we want to bring that 2 down. And then we're going to divide each term by 2 to see what's left. 2x squared divided by 2 is just x squared. 20x divided by 2 is 10x, yep. And then 48 divided by 2 is 24. We have 3 terms inside, so we're focusing now on just the x squared, the 10x, and the 24. We want to see if we can break that down any further. So what I'm looking for now, we're going to forget about the 2 that we pulled out for a minute. Not for forever, just for a minute. And I want to know, are there numbers that multiply to give me 24 and add to give me 10? Multiply to give me 24 and add to give me 10. Think about that. 6 and 4. Okay, so what we do is that 2 that we pulled out, it does not disappear. It just comes down and it stays in front of our parentheses. We're going to set up just like we would if the 2 weren't there. Break down my x squareds. I'm going to put 4 and I'm going to put 6. And then I need to decide about my signs. Are they going to be the same or different based off of that? They're going to be this. Whoa. They're going to be the same. And then we look to the first sign. They're going to both be a plus. Yep. And so all of that is my final answer. That GCF that I pulled out has to stay as part of my answer. It just stays in the front. How do we feel? Can I put 2 things together? All right, go ahead and try 10 then. Again, when we factor, the very, very first thing we want to look at is, do we have a GCF? Is there anything that all of my terms have in common that I can divide out? Three x squared minus 6x minus 45. We're looking to see if they have anything in common. If they do, we're going to pull it out first. Just don't forget, if you pull that GCF out, it needs to go in front of the parentheses, and it cannot be lost. It has to be a part of that final answer. Three x squared minus 6x minus 45 are all divisible by what? 3. So we're going to pull that 3 out. That's going to leave me with x squared minus 2x minus 15. So I want numbers that multiply to give me 15 and subtract to give me 2. What are they? And then are my signs going to be the same or different? Different, yeah. And then the first one goes in front of the bigger number, so that minus goes in front of the 5. It doesn't matter if you write this as 3 times x plus 3 times x minus 5, or if you write it as 3 times x minus 5 and x plus 3, as long as you have what's in the parentheses exactly the same and you have that 3 out front. Okay, I got one more for you. Go ahead and try it. First thing we're looking for is a GCF. If we do not have that, then we can continue to factor as we had discussed. We can call it something different. Do I have a GCF on this one? No. So I want numbers that multiply to give me 12, and I want them to add to give me 9. Multiply to give me 12, maybe, and add to give me 9. So think about your factors: 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Do any of those add to give me 9? No. So sometimes there are problems that cannot factor, okay? And for our answer, what numbers have only a factor of 1 in themselves? Like 1 and 2 and 3 and 5. What are those numbers called? Prime numbers. So if you find that you cannot factor whatever your problem is, if there are no factors that add or subtract to give you that middle term, and you can't pull out a GCF, then what we do is we call it prime. That means it's not factorable. It only has 1 in itself as factors. It doesn't happen a lot, so if you can't figure it out, don't just put prime, okay, unless you've gone through all of your options. Anybody have any questions? your homework. I didn't have a lot of good questions. Remember, try GCF. We'll continue from there. If you have any questions while you're working, just let me know.